Let me start now. So the product from IBM that we are going to talk about today is a product called IBM API Connect. So in terms of its positioning within IBM, it falls within the IBM Cloud or the IBM Integration portfolio. IBM Integration again has been one of the most celebrated portfolios within IBM, and it generates about 50 to 60% of the software revenue that IBM makes year on year. So you would have heard a lot of your customers speaking about digital transformations, and they trying to embark on digital transformation initiatives, be it banks or any other institutions that you're talking to. In which case, one of the key products that they're focusing on currently uh, is IBM API Connect or API management product for that matter. So this is the high level agenda that we have for today. So I'm just going to start with a brief introduction of what APIs mean. What are the business benefits of having an API management strategy within an industry? The product offering from IBM to cover the API management strategy for an organization. The different components within IBM API Connect, and then I will briefly touch upon the licensing and pricing, followed by use cases, which can be very specific to any industry, and how should your customers get started with an API management initiative. Uh, Meanwhile, if you have any doubts, please feel free to stop me anytime during the presentation. I will be able to address your queries then and there. So basically technology has evolved. The way people do businesses have radically transformed from 1990s or way before 1990s to what it was now. So in 1990s we had something called internet, which completely revolutionized industries, and we saw a lot of businesses having their web presence felt. So it can be web presence in terms of creating a website so that people are able to go and shop through their website. Come 2000s, the web channel, after the web channel, there was a new channel that got introduced, which is called the mobile channel. So there were a lot of mobile application developers, uh, and there were a lot of mobile apps that were getting generated through which businesses were able to expand their reach. And in 2015 and forward, we are having something called as an API management or an API strategy, which a lot of customers are embarking on. So the tool that we are going to talk about today is called IBM API Connect, and how it can help customers achieve the API strategy that they might have. So what really are these APIs? So APIs are basically a new channel to reach out to new clients and new partners. And when I say new clients and new partners, these are clients and partners which businesses have never thought about in the past. And it also enables businesses to generate new business models. So let me substantiate that with an example in the later slide. So basically, uh, you might have a business, say for example, it's a retail business, which currently where you might have a brick and mortar way of doing business, or you might have an online presence in the form of an e-commerce store, which is a website. But the reach can be further enhanced, and they can get into an untapped opportunity, which can be through mobile applications, through partners or third-party apps or social networks or IoT devices. And all that is possible only when a business API is made available. Again, like I told, I'll give you some examples of it. So let's take an example of Starbucks. So Starbucks started as a coffee company. So they were into selling coffee beans initially, and then they went into selling coffee to retailers. So now you have Starbucks mobile application, which links to other partner companies such as the likes of Citibank or whoever it may be. So a purchase which is made in Starbucks, or the loyalty points that you gain in a banking transaction, can be translated into a coffee that can be bought on Starbucks. That is possible because Starbucks is able to expose their information as APIs, which a banking customer is able to potentially use and translate that into the number of coffees that can be bought. Similarly, you take an example of Pugo. So Pugo, what it has done is, based on the information that it collects from the connected car that they manufacture, they have now collected so much information that they are able to sell this information to other, sell the vehicle data and the driving patterns of how people drive their vehicles to other external partners who find this information very useful. Citibank is another example. This is again a product which was built on IBM API Connect. So Citibank conducts these regular hackathons. So the hackathons are conducted primarily for the objective of integrating their reward system with retailers and basically encouraging developers to develop applications which can help Citibank generate additional revenue models. So basically, in all these cases, it is a case of digital disruption which is fueled by APIs. So, like I said, what we are talking about now is something called business API. So, business API is basically any business which is able to expose their information in a simple and a secure manner to an external world. So it can be any information in terms of product catalog, store listings, order status. So whatever information which they have within their premises, which can be exposed to the external world, which and it is useful. So in terms of an IT architecture, so you would have heard of traditional ESB or middleware, which was developed by applications. So the middleware was built for the prime purpose of integrating the front end to the back end through a common enterprise service bus. So there are again multiple names given to the middleware or the traditional ESB in terms of service-oriented architecture layer or enterprise service bus or what may be. So the API layer basically sits on the top of the middleware layer, and it acts as a layer which enables microservices architecture, which is meant to be lightweight and which supports massive concurrency. So again, let me give you an example, which is one of my favorite examples, which I give to like, sorry, yeah, sorry. Sorry, do you have a question? Hello. Okay. So let me give you an example. So basically, let me just check if this. So Srijit, do you have a question? Okay, so I take that as a no. Okay, so let me give you an example of a real life use case of APIs as to how it is used. So let's take an example of travel aggregator websites such as Make My Trip or Clear Trip or Skyscanner. So if I, as an application developer, I want to develop an application portal which is very similar to Clear Trip or Make My Trip, then I would look for all the airlines which would expose their information about the real-time rates, the flights that are available on a real-time basis. I would look at all the airlines which are readily exposing their APIs so that they can use those APIs on my website or the new application that I'm going to build. Traditionally, how it used to happen was a Clear Trip or a Make My Trip has to go to Emirates.com and should request Emirates to open their services to Clear Trip, and Emirates should make some changes within the traditional ESB layer to expose their services to Clear Trip, and they should have a way to monetize or monitor the number of requests being made from Clear Trip or Make My Trip or whatever it may be. Going forward, this is not the case. A clear trip or a sky scanner or make my trip nowadays, what it does is it looks for all the airlines which are already exposing their information. If they find that there is some airline which is not exposing their information, then they don't include as a part of their app development, or it doesn't get listed in the part of listings which are available. So who stands to lose as a result of it? It's not the app developer, rather it's the uh, service provider, which is the airline industry in this case. Uh, so that's exactly where API management comes into picture. So if you look at it from Emirates perspective, uh, you will need to have a single platform which helps you expose those APIs, which helps you manage those APIs as to who it is exposed to, how much consumption is being made, and how much calls are being made and stuff like that. And they will also need to secure, because this is information which is exposed to the outside world, they will also need to secure how much calls are being made uh, to this API. So I mean, just to add on to the examples, so other examples that I can talk about is the likes of Zomato, which is very popular in UAE and India, Uber, which everyone knows about. So all these businesses exist with one single model, and the primary model is exposing their information as APIs. So basically, when it comes to exposing APIs, businesses should uh, think about what their
So
customers.
Vivek, sorry, one query, a small query.
Yeah.
You have given an example of Zomato. So
Mhm.
how it means the restaurant party is exposing their API and Zomato is consuming those APIs on their platform?
Okay, so in this case, yes, either the restaurant exposes their APIs, and Zomato consumes those APIs, because you would be able to order food through Zomato, right? So,
Yeah.
or Zomato provides the entire end-to-end platform, in which case there might be some restaurants which are not technically
Right, right.
completely ready, in which case Zomato exposes the APIs for these restaurants to consume, and also provides a platform for the restaurants. So as and when an order is made through Zomato, there is a beep that is made at the restaurant end, which is a platform which is given by Zomato themselves, which helps them know that an order has been placed. So, but the base model is, or there might be the likes of some hotel in like Palm Jumeirah, which has all these some Jumeirah group of hotels which already has this,
Okay.
but they want to just consume Zomato API so that they want to be listed as a part of Zomato. So at real time, if the price has to be changed, if the price of the food has to be changed and stuff like that, then it is possible through this thing, through APIs.
Okay. 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 Thank you.
Yeah. So when it comes to identifying the API use cases, businesses should typically think about what their customers need, and not focus on for what APIs are to be exposed. So I've seen a lot of customers, when they embark on an API management journey or an API initiative, what they think is, okay, we have say 100 services built on our ESB layer. Let's start by exposing all our ESB services as APIs. Is that the right approach? It is definitely not the right approach, because not all your ESB services will need to be exposed as APIs if they are not useful to the external world. So
Yeah.
again, I used to take this example of so I mean Dubai Health Authority, and like how can their information. So if DHA or any health authority across the world, if they want to develop an API management process, so I mean I got this question from one of my partners, where they said like how will it be relevant to a government customer. So think of DHA as an example. So DHA or Dubai Health Authority as an example. So they have a lot of, so what information from DHA, what information does DHA have which is useful for other companies? So DHA has health records of all the patients who visit hospitals on a regular basis. And who needs this information? This information is needed by the insurance companies, because they decide on premiums for for health insurance based on how the health record of a person is. Typically, when you go and apply for a health insurance just to make a premium lesser, we say that we are not a smoker, we are not a drinker, and all these things. But and obviously the insurance company also knows about it, and there is a amount of risk that they add to when they calculate the insurance premium. So this can be avoided if they are able to get very uh, like clear and very what to say accurate information by accessing DHA APIs, so that they can decide on the premium and they can come up with competitive rates when it comes to giving to their customers. So again, so basically, an organization, if they have to implement APIs, there should be a way to make money out of APIs. So no one wants to implement APIs just for the sake of implementing, or just to be in line with the buzzword, which is the digital transformation, right? So there are multiple forms of APIs. There are multiple ways in which APIs can be used to make money. The first and foremost is there are APIs which can be given for free. The examples of that include the likes of Facebook. So you might have uh, many websites which offers you to log in using your Facebook ID or log in using your Google ID. So any thoughts on why Facebook or Google does that?
Just to get data, and they will sell that data.
Exactly. So Facebook and Google does that because it gets to know about your browsing patterns, and by getting to know about your browsing patterns and what you read on the internet, they will target you with appropriate advertisements when you use that platform. Or there can be an example of a developer paying you if for using his API. So I usually take this example of car car agency. So when you go to say Alfute Motors or any car retailer to buy a Toyota or a Lexus or whatever it may be. So typically when you buy a car, of course they enter all your details on that portal, and while they are entering their details, uh, they might be incentivized for promoting certain insurance product, car insurance products, say RSA insurance or an AXA insurance, when compared to other insurance products. Of course, you as a buyer of the car, you have an option to choose the insurance company. But if they are able to promote an AXA insurance or an RSA insurance through that portal, and typically when you're buying a new car, insurance is not in the list of priorities, at least for the first year of buying the car. So RSA and AXA insurance can pay Alfutem, in which case, so sorry, this is an example of developer getting paid. So the app developer is getting paid for using an external API, insurance company API, just because the insurance company is using their APIs in your listing. Or it can be a case of developer paying you for using their API, in which case your API has to be. So take the example of DHA. If I develop an insurance portal and I want some information from DHA which is more valuable to me, then I, as an insurance company, I am ready to pay DHA for using their API. So that is an example of developer pays. Or there can be indirect models where the examples might be similar to the advertisements that you see on YouTube and other areas, just to make the content available, or any news articles or on any news publications like Huffington Post and all these websites that are publishing their advertisements when you browse through multiple things. So those are the examples of indirect targeting using APIs. So any doubts until now that you would like me to cover? So yeah, I take that as a no. So let's get on to the overview of IBM API Connect. So what is IBM API Connect? So basically it is a single platform which helps you create APIs, which helps you secure APIs and which helps you manage the APIs that have been developed. So when it comes to an API management journey, you need one platform which can help you do all these things. So basically, IBM API Connect is a platform. It's one single platform where you can do all these three things. So this is again an entire end-to-end cycle of what an API management life cycle encompasses. So it is basically, so you create an API. After you have created the API, you have to secure the API. You will need to manage who's using those APIs. You will need to have a way to socialize, to let any queries being asked or let any details being asked. You'll need to have a way to monetize. So any API that's exposed to an external world has to make money. So how do you set these monetization rules? So do you want to set a rule stating that the first API calls, first 100 API calls for a given month will be free for a particular partner, and after that I'm going to charge the partner, say 50 fills for every call made? Then that level of monetization algorithm also has to be made. And most of all, you will need to analyze who's using how much APIs, and based on that you'll need to improve upon those APIs or make those APIs available, uh, or make some changes to those APIs to be more accessible in future. In terms of the analyst reports, IBM API Connect again is a leader, be it any analyst for that matter. So Forrester rates it at the top. Gartner places it in the leaders quadrant, and the worldwide integration market share held by IBM is about 22.5%. So that's the strength of IBM when it comes to the integration portfolio. So let me explain this further through the four primary roles that will be available when it comes to implementing an API management initiative within a customer organization. So let's assume a customer who wants to implement API management. Then the four roles that he'll need to think of. So it can be one single person who's doing all these four roles, two persons who are doing these four roles, or whatever it may be. But basically, there are four different types of roles that has to be allocated. So the first thing is something called as an API product manager. So what he typically does is he is the owner of all the API products. So he decides what APIs will need to be exposed, when will it need to be exposed, to whom will it need to be exposed, and what are the SLAs and what are the rules that govern the usage of those APIs. Then you have an API developer who who needs to have a platform to create these APIs, to secure these APIs, and after securing, a way to publish these APIs so that it can be available to the public. Then you have the API operations team who needs to have a single platform which helps them manage the governance of APIs across multiple different environments. So think of it like administrator, system administrator who manages different environments in an application development. And then you have something called an application developer. So the application developer is the likes of developers of ClearTrip or MakeMyTrip, who develop these APIs, who will be consuming these APIs exposed by a bank or whichever organization it may be, to track the usage, and who's also able to track the usage as to how much he has used those APIs, to measure the amount of success that he has received by using those APIs. So like I said, the four roles are very important roles. So IBM API Connect as a platform addresses the needs of all these four different roles. First and foremost, it starts with the API developer. So the API developer develops the API using an API toolkit. So there is a development toolkit that comes along with the product, which helps the API developer to develop the APIs. And after she has developed, she will be able to set the target endpoint and she will be able to secure the API using API gateway. Uh, API manager, so there is a separate management console, which is an API management console, will be able to use this, or the API developer will be able to use this, or the API man operations, all three will be able to use this to do whatever job that they want to do. API operations, for example, might want to monitor the usage of these APIs or track the API usage across multiple different environments. An API manager might look at a way to promote these APIs across multiple environments, or he needs a single platform which can help him decide on which API should be accessed by whom, to what level should they be used, how much should they be used, and how much should they be charging for every usage. So you might develop a plan which says first 100 APIs calls for a particular API is free per month, and after that I'm going to charge say 50 fills for every additional API call made. So these are plans which can be different for different categories of partners. So you might have a gold category of partner, you might have a silver category of partner, or you might have a bronze category of partners. Based on which category of partner it is, you might need to target them appropriately. So you might have a key partner who would want to treat very well. So in which case, all these plans and all these different charging mechanisms can be built by the API manager. And of course, you will have the app developer who needs a developer portal to subscribe to these APIs. So he needs a developer portal to subscribe to these APIs and to see how much is being used and stuff like that. And of course, there is an API gateway which comes along with the product, which helps you secure the APIs. This is again a different view of the API management, or different components within the API management product. So like I said, there is a developer portal, which is primarily for developers who are the consumers of the APIs. Then you have an API manager. This is for developers and business users. Then you have the security gateway, or the API gateway. What I didn't talk about before is the analytics. Then you have the developer toolkit and the container manager and microservices compute. So these are again very specific for the new age development technologies. So if your customer is looking to develop a cloud native application where APIs will need to be containerized and developed based on microservices architecture, the same is being supported by IBM as well as a part of the product. So this is again a different view of how the end-to-end flow works in an API management in IBM API Connect. So basically, you would have a lot of assets which are built within your organization, and you might want to expose these assets as APIs. So you start off by developing those APIs using the developer toolkit, and you publish them onto the API management console. The API manager uses that. He decides on who will need to have access to which APIs and publishes that on the developer portal. And he also makes sure that the APIs are secure through the API gateway. Excuse me. The app developer who is trying to consume those APIs logs into the developer portal, looks at the documentation related to how to consume a particular API. He consumes those APIs through the API gateway, and he goes and reaches the backend system to get the response for whatever API he has consumed. So again, you would see here that the API gateway is placed within the DMZ zone, and that is with a specific purpose, because you would not want traffic from external parties to come and hit your trusted zone and hack your website when you don't know for sure that the traffic that is coming in is adhering to the SSL rules that are set, adhering to the messaging rules, and adhering to the messaging norms that are set by the organization. And of course, based on how much APIs is used, you will want to generate analytics out of it, which is also available as a part of the product. Like I said, then you have the container manager. So if you want to build these APIs as a completely cloud native application, that support is also being provided by IBM API Connect. So let's talk about the role of security gateway that I had mentioned, because this is a this is also sold as a separate product within IBM. But the good news is that it's included as a part of API Connect offering when customers buy API Connect. So basically, the within the DMZ zone, you can do a lot of things. So it can be assuring that the transport level security is met, assuring that there is threat protection norms which are met, assuring that the SLA policies and the triple factor authentication, all these authentication will need to be done before a message actually reaches the internal network of a particular customer. And that's exactly what API, the security gateway, provides. So basically, you will have your customer who has separate systems for identity federation, monitoring, authentication, access control, transformation, message security, and all these things. All these different systems can be replaced by one single product, which is called IBM Data Power Gateway. It can be placed in the DMZ zone, it can be placed in the trusted zone, or it can be placed in both the zones. And regardless of wherever it is placed, there can be multiple different use cases which can be implemented within IBM Data Power Gateway, which is as listed on the presentation slide that you're looking at. So basically, when a message reaches a backend system, you are pretty sure that the message that it is reaching has been authenticated, is adhering to the SSL rules that are set by the organization, and any load balancing or any protocol mediation rules which are set at the DMZ level has been taken care of. So that's again, and so what you see on the slide is an example of the different kinds of analytics or the insights that you can gain from API usage. So if you remember, I had told about being able to create multiple plans using API management portal. So this is exactly how it looks like. So you can create gold partners, travel agent, affiliate program, IATA members only. So based on whichever business you are into, you can custom make these plans. You can set your own terms and conditions for each of those plans, and you can set rate limits of how much API calls can be made, how much burst limits can be configured, and stuff like that. So all these plans can actually be translated to rewards and stuff like that. And the best part is you can also set monetization rules. So like I said, the terms of service can be included as a part of API management console. So basically, when a partner wants to expose or access an API, he can look into the terms and conditions. You can set who these APIs can be visible to, and the billing model. So the billing model again can be, how do you bill that, how much price do you set per month, and how much amount of free trial days would you set, and stuff like that. This is again the kind of enforcements that can be set when it comes to accessing those APIs using API management console. So if the number of APIs that a partner is meant to access on a given particular month has expired, then what should you do? Should you suspend the application, or should you migrate subscription to another plan? So it comes out of the box with all the scenarios that any businesses can think of when it comes to monetizing and managing the different APIs that are being exposed to the external world. So any questions from anyone before I can jump onto the licensing and pricing? Okay, so I take that as a no then. So let me talk about the licensing and pricing next then. So basically, API management as a product can be deployed on IBM cloud, can be deployed on third-party cloud, or can be deployed on premises. The best part is the licensing model can either be subscription regardless of whatever the deployment model is. Even for an on-premise, it can be a subscription licensing model, or it can be perpetual. So a subscription is basically based on the number of API calls per month, and a perpetual licensing will give you an unlimited API calls per month. So for a subscription based licensing, which is a hybrid license model, we are looking at about 28K for 50 million API calls per year, which is quite a substantial number of API calls per year. And this is across all environments, of course. But this is a very good model for targeting small and medium customers in this region, because the amount of API calls that you can make using this model is still very generous when it comes to the licensing model. So a reserved instance would give you 300 million API calls per year, which is again a lot, which large enterprises can probably look at. But for small and medium enterprises, in my view, 50 million should be a good enough number. In terms of part numbers, IBM has made it a lot more simpler now, because 46 part numbers that it used to be before has now been reduced to 6 part numbers. And these are the part numbers that we are looking at for a hybrid instance. I'm just focusing on that, assuming everyone is going to push on it for the first time. So we are looking at 50 million API calls per year. We are looking at only 2 part numbers. This is again an IBM's view of how much a first API implementation project would cost. So this is including the implementation services, which is a very generous number. But having said that, in this region, anywhere between 50K to 75K, including services, is what I'm thinking of when it comes to implementing the first API management initiative with any customer. The key is to identify the use cases for those customers. I'm sure every customer will have a use case. Please reach out to us, or you can reach out to me about uh, any customers whom you have good relationship with. I can validate about their industry and come up with use cases. We can have a conversation with them, and we can go and meet them, and we can start positioning the product right away. So this is again in terms of the minimum number of cores required. So basically, there are 4 components in an API Connect product. So one is the gateway, which requires 4 cores, and there is an analytics instance which requires 2 cores. There is a developer portal which requires 2 cores for licensing, and there is a management instance that requires 4 cores. So the minimum required configuration would be 840 PVUs per environment. So this is again, as we expand further, these are again IBM's recommendations, which are again very generous, but based on what the use cases are and based on what are the traffic that we expect from each and every customer, we can definitely work on what would be the best sizing for any customers that we want to deal with. So let me talk specifically about use cases in banking industry or any industry. So I have some examples for banking industry use cases, and of course this can expand based on who the audience are. So basically, when it comes to identifying the use cases, the key is to identify who the audience of your API Connect, who are going to use those APIs. So who's the basic audience? What do they want to, what are their business benefits of using your APIs? And once that has been identified, you expose those APIs, and then you decide upon what are the terms and conditions that you are willing to make those assets available. So I have a list of some popular banking APIs which is used by most banks. So think of a scenario where you develop an external mobile application where you want to locate ATMs for any bank in a particular location. So basically this is a branch locator and an ATM locator. So banks can expose these APIs, and these APIs can be used by applications, portals, partner sites, or third party sites, or whatever it may be. Or it can be a case of Swift codes and BIC codes, which typically we forget, uh, which can be made available in payment aggregator apps for any payments that we want to make to our home country or wherever it may be. Or it can be a rewards points management, like the example that I gave you before. Uh, a card transaction that you do using your credit card can actually translate into the amount of coffee that you can buy in Starbucks. So that is possible if both these organizations are able to talk to each other through APIs on real time based on how much transactions is being made. And then you have digital wallet services, forex and remittance rates, which are again things that changes on a regular basis. So you can have a tourism mobile app that you're building, or an exchange house, which can, so an xc.com or any other exchange website is taking all this information at a real time. So it basically works on the API model. Or it can, you can also think about a depositing and a lending rate or eligibility calculator. So if you want to develop a real estate application, you want to sell a property to a customer on real time, if you want to calculate what the lending rate on his bank would be, then API management is the answer for that. So, in terms of banking, IBM has a relationship with Banking Industrial Architecture Framework, where both IBM and BN have joined together to create specific standards for banking industry. So these are standards, so very similar. So you would have heard of this term called WSDL file, which is primarily used for SOAP message format. So similarly, there's something called Swagger, which is used for APIs. So IBM and BN have jointly worked together and come up with ready-made standards for some of the most commonly used APIs, which is available in this portal. So I will be sharing this link with all of you. So I would recommend that you please go through it, because what I'm going to show you next is the use cases by industry. So again, this link, just see if I'm sharing. So, are you able to share my screen now? So I mean, see my screen now, which says use cases for industry. Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, this has the list of all industries that your customers might reside in, be it banking, petroleum, electronics, financial services, whatever it may be. So you click on that. This is again an IBM website. It comes up with recommendations of how API Connect can be used in that specific industry. It also talks about use cases of how customers have used it across multiple areas, which will be very useful when it comes to identifying specific use cases for a particular industry. So this is again a roadmap or a suggestion to your customers on how they can get started with an API management journey. So the first step is to understand what API means for their business, where high level briefing is required. So again, please feel free to contact me should you want any assistance regarding this. I'm more than willing to come and meet your customers and talk them through the journey that they should be taking when it comes to implement an API management initiative. I can be very technology agnostic. I can talk as a consultant not speak a lot about IBM. If your customers don't prefer that, that's also perfectly fine. Then the next step would be to learn how to expose these APIs, and then we go about how API Connect can be useful for them, implementing the first use case as a pilot and moving from pilot to a program based on analysis of their environment. Uh, Again, this is a link which gives the list of all trainings that are available from IBM when it comes to certifications. I recommend that everyone goes through these links uh, so that you can stay enabled with the certification programs which are available from IBM. And of course, the more certifications that you do, the better program margins you get. So for any product that is sold from IBM, I mean, if you do for certifications in the API management space, for any API management deal that you close with the customer, you get margins between 40 to 70%. If you are on programs and you have the sufficient certifications. And the best part is you might also have some leads being passed directly by IBM because IBM uses has implemented Watson within their lead generation program. So based on the number of certifications that you do, the more leads can get passed to you directly from IBM, where we as a distributor don't even get involved. That's all I have from my side. Any questions? Anyone? Hello?
Nothing from my side. Thank you so much. That was an informative session. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Vivek. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. So, any questions or like that you don't have now? I mean, in future, should you have any further questions that you would want to ask, or any enablements that you would want to run to your customers, please feel free to reach out to me. I am more than willing to come and run these enablements to your customers directly.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for attending the call today. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you taking time out to attend the call. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.